Everyone knows they're going to die, but no one knows what that means. What happens when this all ends? What comes next? And whether you realize it or not, your beliefs about death shape how you live now, what you chase, what you fear, what you hold on to. Because if this life is all there is, it demands one kind of posture. But if there's something more, something just beyond what we can see, then maybe we've been missing a big piece of the puzzle we were never meant to leave out. For most of history, these questions belong to religion, philosophy, or personal opinion. But that's changing because science has made some major breakthroughs. And as the research around consciousness comes into full view through near-death studies, hospice care, neuroscience, and quantum physics, we're being invited into a startling possibility that consciousness may not come from the brain. It may pass through it. And that brings us to today's guest, Julie McFadden. As a hospice nurse, she's seen what few have. She sat beside hundreds of people in their final days and witnessed some of the most mysterious and consistent patterns at the edge of life. She's also become a leading voice online with millions of followers and a New York Times bestselling book, Nothing to Fear. Today, we explore what she's seen, what it might mean, and how death, rather than ending the story, might just be a continuation. At Mighty Pursuit, we help you make sense of life by looking at the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, not as vague wellness cliches, but as interconnected parts of your everyday experience. Today's episode zooms into our truth category, where we explore the big questions, death, consciousness, and what it all means. And in this conversation, we explore how those questions shape our sense of purpose, what actually matters in this life, and how that understanding shows up in the way we serve others. We go deep into deathbed visions, into moments of lucidity in Alzheimer's patients who suddenly wake up, and into stories of people who somehow seem to choose when they'll die. And once you hear what really happens in hospice care, you may never see reality the same way again. Wanted to begin the conversation by talking about Steve Jobs. Most people remember him as the iconic founder of Apple.
Yes.
Lots of products. iPhone, he's a visionary behind that, which is incredible. And he passed away in 2011, but far fewer people know what happened in the final moments of his life. And I think that has a ton of relevance for this conversation today. So can you take us into what happened at the end of his life?
Yeah, there is a beautiful article written by his sister. I didn't realize his sister wrote it. She wrote something in that article that I always say people die how they lived. And she wrote, maybe not those exact words, but something like that about his death. Like in his final days, he really died the way he lived, which she meant like intentional, and there was a process to it. And it was just so beautiful. You know, those last few days, she said it was like he knew he was going to die. He had called her and started saying his goodbyes. And she was like, it's okay, I'm getting in a cab, I'm flying there, I'll be there soon. And he was like, no, I'm not sure if you're gonna make it. Like, I wanna make sure you know how I feel about you and the things I wanna tell you. But anyway, she ended up making it, and he was bedside with his family, his kids, her. And in the article, she said that he looked, right before he died, he looked all of his children and his family, his wife, in the eyes without saying a word, and then slowly gazed beyond them, I get chills just thinking about it, and said, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. And then died.
Yeah, when it comes to Steve Jobs, I mean, that moment could sound very strange if you're hearing it for the first time. And, like what was he seeing? Like, you're saying like, oh, wow, wow, wow. But in your world, hospice care, that is actually commonplace. And in fact, there are, if people have, who are to pick up your book, they'll realize that there are a number of things that happen near the end of life that kind of really challenge our understanding of reality, like what is all this stuff, or even the brain. And I think, in your book you talk about rallying, and which is terminal lucidity. And I think that's really interesting, especially if you look at cases of Alzheimer's patients who, with our common understanding of the brain, you have this picture of they basically just go offline. And then you see the deterioration if you were to look at the brain on a scan of what's happening. And yet in this kind of rally phenomenon, even with cases in Alzheimer's, you have them at least momentarily come back into a state of lucidity, and now they're talking perhaps like they once did, which is really strange if you think about that. And what I think is interesting about your work is it is one piece of the puzzle, and we've kind of been studying all these pieces of the puzzle the past few years, which I think is really interesting, to something that is being revealed across science over the last few years, neuroscience, near-death studies, even like quantum physics. They're kind of circling around this question around consciousness not being produced by the brain. Is it something that's channeled through the brain? And I think then when you look at some of these phenomena that we're going to talk about, I think it's really fascinating. And your work really challenges not just how we see death and what comes after, but how we see things now. And so I could see this like in your story, in the sense that you've seen all of these things and you don't fear death anymore. So I just wanted to see like your mentality on that after everything that you've been exposed to, the idea of like there's nothing to fear.
Right. Hence my book, right? The title, Nothing to Fear. I do give a caveat that I still think there's nothing to fear, but the caveat is that but it's also normal to fear because we're still human, right?
Yeah.
We're still human. We're still going to have human emotions. Even if I were to be diagnosed with something terminal tomorrow, I would still have human emotions, sadness, anger, fear. But generally speaking, because I've been a hospice nurse and an ICU nurse, so ICU nurse first, which made me want to become a hospice nurse, and seeing death day in and day out, not only biologically is it not scary because our body physically knows how to do it and helps us do it, but then the things that I've witnessed, like you said, people visioning, people seeing dead relatives before they die, dead loved ones, old pets come by to like make them feel comforted before they die. Someone like Steve Jobs saying, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow," before he dies, which I've seen people do that like countless times. Maybe not say, "Oh wow," but call out their husband's name or say they see God, say they see angels. The rally or the surge of energy people have before they die. I've witnessed, people choosing when they're going to die. So all these things that mysteriously, it is a mystery. We don't know why they happen, but they do happen. Seeing all these things has made me really be like, I sound so cheesy, but like, wow, there's nothing to fear. And I want people to know that, hence the name of the book. We need to talk about this because just because you do fear it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah, what I love about you is it's clear from watching your videos and reading your book, you have such a great respect for science.
Yeah.
And you're in hospice care, and so there's so much of that you can see through your work. But at the same time, you have this other lens of looking at, what do these things mean? Like trying to consider a larger reality. And I think you're seeing a lot more medical professionals and scientists speak up about this stuff lately. But up until maybe the last few years, maybe 5 years, like there's been a real hesitance and almost like an apologetic type way of like, I don't know if I should be talking about this. And I get why, right? Because as soon as you start talking about these things, the brain is associative. So you start thinking about dysfunctional types of religion, belief systems, dogma, all of this stuff. And so, but what I think is interesting is your work in some of these other fields I'm talking about, their observation. It has nothing to do with like a religious doctrine that's happening. And it's kind of like this new category that's emerging. And even if you watch some of these panels online, when it comes to talking about consciousness or something that like your field, there's a complete change in tone. It's like a new category emerging. One maybe that can think about science and still hold this in a rigorous mindset, and then also be able to hold this other reality. And so being inside the medical world, like what are you observing about that? I mean, offline, we were just talking about other hospice nurses, but how are you seeing that conversation evolve in terms of holding the complexity of these things together?
Yeah, I think the reason why, at least for me, why I still hold on to the science piece of it is because I want people to know that, like, I'm not just saying this to say this, or I'm not saying what I've seen to have an agenda of like, so you should believe there's an afterlife. That's not what I want. And I think that's what most people in our field, they feel the same way. They know there is something going on. We don't exactly understand it. And I think a lot of people are now saying we don't know why it is, and some people are even trying to study it, just anecdotally trying to get stories together so they can start to see like what are the patterns, what are most people saying. So there's still science behind things that people are witnessing in the sense of gathering information, trying to be unbiased, and it's hard too because there's not necessarily money to be had. So it's like, or death is not something that people can make money on. So it's hard to like get funding. But people are still trying to get answers to why do these things happen?
Yeah. The actual, your colleagues and people that have experienced the same things as you, like what are those types of conversations like amongst yourselves?
It depends. I mean, I think most of us carry on how I carry on, which is we don't know why it happens, but we know it does. So it's important to educate people and tell people. There are still like outliers where there are people who witness this all the time and they are constantly just being like, it must be something biological. We don't know what it is, but that's what it is. And that's their take on it. It must be medication. It must be something that we don't fully understand yet. And then there's people on the other side being like, it must be because there is truly an afterlife and that is why this is happening. And then most of us are in between there, which is like a little bit of mystery and a little bit of science.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this to you offline, but one of our recent guests, Dr. Lisa Miller, she's a scientist at Columbia. And she's kind of one of the pioneers that studies the science of spirituality. And, she's done MRI studies, genotyping studies, long-term clinical research. And so she proposed something which I think is completely game-changing, which is that religion, as we think of it, is a belief system. And yet spirituality is like a seat of perception, meaning like if there is a spiritual landscape, it's not something we necessarily need to believe in or is dictated by our beliefs. It's not an invention or imagination. It's already there. And so the question isn't whether it exists. The question is whether we tune in. And so when you think about that definition and then I read your book, it's like with your patients, especially as they are near death, it seems to be there's some sort of amplified awareness that they are tuning into. And then I connect these dots. I'm like, this is just insane. She's saying this over here, completely unrelated to hospice care. And then I'm seeing this with your patients. So take me into that kind of like amplified awareness someone seems to have when they are near death.
Yes. And it doesn't matter if they're religious or not.
Yeah.
Just FYI. So I've heard people describe it as time standing still, like with them dying to them feels like their life and time and like even space, like actual space, the room that they're in seems to be like standing still. They can hear people talking about like everyday things like the grocery list and things that need to be happening, right? That you're so focused on as the person who's not dying, right? And they said that it's like they're in a different world, a different realm, even though they're still here, right? And it feels like time standing still. It feels expansive. And, and then we can also talk about either now or later like that. And then at times they see people, right? They see their dead father who comes to them just as real as you and I are, like you and I sitting here. when they're in this realm, talking to them like, we're going to come get you soon. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. So they feel like they're almost in between worlds. And not everyone will be able to articulate it like that, but many, many people do. And it doesn't matter if they have a religion or not. And in fact, many people will say, I've never been religious. I don't even know if I believe in this stuff, but this is what's happening to me. And it's usually very comforting. They don't feel scared about it. They feel comforted. And it's comforting to me listening to them talk about that. It's like, yeah, and I almost think I can feel it too. Like I always liken death to a baby being born, because I feel like when I witness baby being born, there's like a feeling in the room that's like, of course this new thing is here, right? Or even if I'm not right there when their birth is happening, but even just holding a newborn, I feel like I look at it and I'm like, where have you come from? Like, this is crazy just looking at you. It feels like you're from another place, and it's a good feeling. And I feel like that when I watch someone dying. Like it feels like time stands still, especially when they take their last breath and then they're gone. You can feel the difference.
Yeah. I mean, just so people understand the scope of this, because, my mouth dropped when I first heard the numbers, right? So people might hear this conversation and be like, oh, well, she's just talking about anecdotes and like just maybe one-off instances. But like, how many patients experience some form of what's called deathbed phenomena in hospice care?
Over 80%.
80%.
Over 80% of people. Mm-hmm.
And, for those who've never heard the term deathbed phenomena, like what is it? What does that exactly refer to?
So there's different types. The main two that we see are terminal lucidity, which is that burst of energy before someone dies, and then visioning. Those are the top two that we see. But then there's also things like the death stare, which I think Steve Jobs had, where someone's staring off. The death reach, where they're reaching up for somebody. Deciding when they're going to die, waiting for everyone, like waiting until everyone's in the room and then dying, waiting until everyone leaves and then dying, waiting for a certain event and then dying. So the timing of their own death. And it's just something that like I see all the time as a hospice nurse, so much so that I educate my families about it so they're not shocked, when this starts happening.
Yeah. What's so fascinating is, we were talking offline. There's you and a couple others who have developed large followings online, but most people are completely unfamiliar with hospice care. And this is so common that it's literally in hospice textbooks.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's insane. Even as a new hospice nurse, when I would hand out these pamphlets and I read them to know what was in them, I remember thinking, how irresponsible of us as healthcare providers to give someone a book that says something, like around 3 weeks before death, your loved one may start seeing the unseen and basically talking to dead people. And I remember thinking, I cannot believe we're handing this out, because I came from the ICU where like that didn't happen, one. And if it did, it was always like they're confused. And there was a lot of ICU psychosis and delirium and stuff in the hospital, which is different. So I couldn't believe it. And then after a couple of years, it's like, oh yeah, I totally see why, because it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And now that I educate about it, I'm not as afraid to tell my families when I go visit them, like this may happen. 9 out of 10 times I'll say it, and then the family or the patient will already go, it's already happening. Oh my God. I didn't tell anybody because I thought they were going to think I was crazy, but I just saw my grandpa, blah, 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 blah. So now I see it even more because I am bringing it up, and then people tell me.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'd like to do is, I want to get into the middle of that, like what actually happens, help people process this, not just in like the moment of death, but in the days or hours leading up to it. Because like some of the most beautiful, incredible things like happen, and some of the stories in your book, I was just like, this is insane. So I think
tell me about it.
So one of the most common is deathbed visioning. So can you take us into that? What do people see? What do they describe?
Yeah. So deathbed visioning, one common misconception is people will see things right before they die. Now they can, but usually people start seeing dead relatives, if they had a good relationship. Whenever I say that, people are like, I don't want to see my grandpa. And it's like, well, no, they usually see people they want to see. So dead relatives, dead friends, dead pets. And it's usually about 3 weeks before they die. So as a hospice nurse, like clinically, if someone's telling me that they're seeing people that aren't there and they're, that have died, I will clock that like, okay, they're probably going to die soon. I'll make sure I tell the family. I'll make sure I tell them if they're alert and oriented, which by the way, they usually are. Another misconception is that people are deprived of oxygen or on so many medications, or they have a release of DMT because they're like so near death, which is not even, we don't even know if that's actually happening. But so that's not what's happening, because they are usually 3 weeks before death, 3-4 weeks. So they're usually like walking, talking, eating, fully alert and oriented. And they're just as concerned as like their family is about, why am I seeing my dead parents? It's comforting, but they're also surprised. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of me educating, about the fact that they're visioning and that's normal and that's okay. And how does it make you feel? And they usually say, good, comforted. I haven't seen them in so long. I'm so happy, that I got to see them. And they said they were coming to get me. That is the main thing. It's usually family members who come back and say, you're not leaving yet, but we'll come get you. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. Or pets that have died, they'll say that they come and sleep with them every night.
Is it always someone that's dead?
Yes.
Like it's never someone that's living?
No. Well, I guess I've heard that from dementia patients, people who seem less lucid. Sometimes they'll say, cousin Sandy was here, but they are not dead. And sometimes people will say stuff, someone with dementia, or not dementia, but they'll say, so-and-so came to see me last night, and they don't even know they're dead. And then the family will be like, oh my God, they died last week, and they didn't even know.
So it's like they had some sort of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if you had to put, this is just estimating or ballparking, but like if you had to put an estimation on it, what percentage of people that they say they're seeing are dead?
Percentage on what again? Say it.
So if you had to take 10 people, had this experience, what percentage of the figures that they say are seeing are deceased versus someone
9.9.
Okay.
Every once in a while, someone's not, but I would say almost always they're dead.
And what are those family members or people that they knew that are dead? What are they saying to them?
It's okay. We'll take care of you. Don't be worried. Don't be afraid. We'll come get you. And it's not always family members now that I think about it. A lot of times they will say they see God. They see angels. If they are religious, like a lot of times if someone is Christian, they will say like, I saw Jesus. Or a lot of times when it's closer to their death, like Steve Jobs, they'll say stuff like, I see the light. Or if they're staring, I'll say, what are you looking at? And they'll say the angels or the light, or just say, it's so beautiful. So there's things like that. Now, those things, that is still visioning, but I usually see that when they're closer to death. Yeah. The real visions where they're like, I see, or a brother who died, right? My brother who died 10 years ago, like those kind of visions are usually a few weeks before they die. And they're clear. They're really clear. Like they come in like they're real, just as like you and I.
Yeah, the natural inclination of somebody listening is going to be, they're going to hear this and they're going to say, okay, this is just neural misfiring, hallucination, brain is trying to comfort itself or something. I don't know.
Yes.
So how would you respond to that, especially given how consistent the experiences seem to be?
I don't believe that. But even people who do vision, because they're alert and oriented. Like I've had many people say it's probably just my brain trying to comfort me. Like people who've actually have had it done, who've witnessed this on their own, like who are dying, will say that to me. And I always answer with the truth, which is, I don't know, because I don't. I don't know. That doesn't mean it's not happening though, and that's what I take. Like, to me, as long as it's comforting to somebody, who cares why it's happening is what I think.
Well, I think what's interesting about it is because when you, and this is where it's like, is this depicting something true about reality? Because if you look at the difference between a deathbed vision and then something like psychosis or delirium, I mean, you talked about this a little bit about your book. Those seem to be such separate things that are happening. And can you explain why that would be?
That's great. Yes. So I don't know why deathbed visions happen.
Yeah.
But I know why I know why they don't, right? The don'ts of it. People will say it's ICU psychosis, it's delirium, it's the medications, it's because they're oxygen deprived. I know that is not true, right? I, as an ICU nurse, have seen someone who is delirious, who has ICU psychosis or delirium or medically induced psychosis because of medications, or hallucinations because of a disease process. Those things I can tell you with 100% certainty are not happening with visioning. I can tell you because I know the difference. I've seen it millions, maybe not millions of times, but many, many, many times over my 16 years of nursing. I know what it looks like when someone has low oxygen and they're acting confused and they're talking to somebody who's not there and they're a little out of it, right? And then they come to. I know what it looks like when someone has too many medications on board and they're agitated and saying they see a dark shadow in the corner and it's scaring them, right? Visioning is not that. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not that. Visioning is like you and I sitting here and me suddenly seeing my dead uncle, Jack, who I haven't seen since he died, and he's telling me that I'm going to be okay and he's going to come get me. I mean, it's that clear. People who, and I only know this because I've seen it so many times over the years of me being a hospice nurse.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I mean, this is where I go back to the science thing is like, there are things that are happening where I think we could look at with a critical brain, a logical brain. I actually think skepticism is a great thing. I mean, we would start believing things that are just absurd, and people have throughout history. But when you look at these experiences, it's like, okay, something different is happening here, and I really need to consider what, the possibilities of what's actually happening here, what it means about reality. I think the key difference for me when I read your book that was standing out is that these seem to be almost exclusively positive experiences.
Right.
And so when people are schizophrenic or they're under psychosis, there's a distress and things that are happening there that could potentially be detrimental and harmful. And so, I think what's interesting is when family members come to you and they're like, well, I'm very concerned about what's happening. What do you tell them?
Yes, which has happened. One of my favorite stories is a family calling me and really concerned. You have to come over. Like dad, something's wrong with dad, right? Who is the patient? And I came over, and the patient was looked and acted totally fine, fully alert and oriented, and when the family left the room, I went to go leave the room too to talk to them. But before I did, he grabbed my arm and was like, hey, they think I'm crazy, because I told them that my parents came to me last night and I was really afraid, but I'm not anymore because they came to me. He's the one who said, they came to me and said, I'm not dying yet, but soon I am, and they're going to come get me and it's going to be okay. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, which I've heard this over and over again. So I was like, how are you? How did it make you feel? And he was like, I feel better, but they think I'm crazy. And I'm like, I know, listen. And I explained to him what's going on. And I said, I don't know what it is, but it happens all the time. And like, just go with it. Okay. I'll go talk to him. And then I left. And of course I'm leaving. And then the family's whispering to me too, grabbing my arm. Hey, he's saying he's seeing his parents. We need to give him some medication. Something's going on with him. I'm worried, blah, blah, blah. And they're really concerned. I get it. They're frightened for him. And I just educate. I go, listen, we don't know what's going on, but there's no reason to medicate him. He's totally alert and oriented, and he's not agitated. If he's not agitated, we're just going to go with it. And 9.9 times out of 10, they go, okay, yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's so fascinating, the awareness that they have of themselves.
Exactly. Yes.
And
that's the difference. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I mean is, like, every once in a while, someone's at the end of their life and they're still saying kind of confusing things. But most of the time, they're totally alert and oriented and have total awareness that this is strange about what I'm saying.
I mean, you probably have, but have you ever seen something or have a story about somebody who was kind of skeptical or not about this, like their whole life, and then they suddenly start experiencing this? It's like shifting, like what
I
is
would
happening?
say most people.
Yeah.
Yes, most people. Again, like, there are people who believe in it and they're okay with it and they think it's fascinating too. But I would say most people are just as not alarmed, but just as, like, surprised as anyone would be that it's happening.
Do you have a story in terms of maybe the most startling vision that you ever witnessed, something that just, like, stopped in your tracks, like, this is really bizarre?
I have one. It's not a vision, but it was literally startling and bizarre. I don't even think it's in my book, actually.
Okay.
It was not a vision, but it was a medical phenomenon, I think, because he knew he was dying. So it was a man in a nursing home, and I got a text from work to go see him because he hadn't been seen this week. And I went to go into this into his room in the nursing home, and he was laying there looking like he was asleep, not actively dying, just asleep. And I went to go, like, talk to him and touch him, and all of a sudden he whipped up in bed and scared me. I actually jumped, and he grabbed I went, ah! And he grabbed my arm and goes, "I'm gonna die, baby." And I swear to God, laid down and died. I know. And scared the crap out of me. Now, that is like a strange phenomena of people knowing when they're going to die and calling it out, which I have other stories about that too, but that was the most startling, literally. I literally screamed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a segue into the next. I mean, the visioning is not the only thing. There's so many things that happen, and so this idea of choosing when you die. I mean, I know you changed the names of people in your book, but there's a story, page 100, Juanita, a patient you were caring for in her 80s. What happened with her story? Because that was just like, how are people choosing when they're dying here? So
yes, Juanita. Yeah, her story is crazy. So she was a patient there are patients that come onto hospice that are almost not appropriate. Like they're so not. They almost don't meet the criteria to get onto hospice. And she was one of them. She had one of those, like, chronic long-term illnesses that, like, maybe she would be appropriate, maybe she wouldn't. So when she came onto service, she almost didn't get on service. And the next week I went to go see her, but I got a call from her caregiver instead and said, "Hey, you have to come by because so-and-so died." The patient had died a week later. I didn't even get to see her again. And I was like, "What? What happened?" She's like, "You're not going to believe it. So I went to the house to go do the death visit because she was dead. And the caregiver said the night before they were making blueberry muffins like they always did on Sunday night or something. And when they were done, the patient said, "I'm going to bed. I'm really tired." So the caregiver was like, "Okay, yeah," and tried to help her into bed. And the patient started being like, "Listen, I love you. Thank you for caring for me. Thank you for caring for my son," because she also had a son there that had some disabilities. So the caregiver was taking care of both of them. "Thank you for caring for my son. Promise me you'll always take care of him." And the caregiver was kind of like, "What are you talking about? Of course. Like, I'm going to take care of you and him. Like, everything's fine." She's like, No. I'm tired. Listen, I'm tired. I'm going away tonight. Please promise me you'll take care of him. And the caregiver was like, "Okay, you're fine. Would you quit talking like this?" She goes, "Go get my son. I'm going home." Got her son. She was whispering, like, sweet nothings to the son, like, "I love you, I love you, I love you," like, said she couldn't really hear what she was saying, but she was like whispering to him and he was saying, I love you back. And she's like hugging him and kissing him, saying goodnight. He leaves. And again, she tells the caregiver, like, I love you. Thank you. Please take care of him. I'm going home. And by this time, the caregiver was kind of like, okay, like, I'll see you in the morning, just letting it go. Went to bed, woke up the next morning. She was gone. She was gone. And that's when she called me. And it's just wild when people know, she kept saying, I'm going home, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm leaving here. She was talking in euphemisms. She wasn't saying like, I'm going to die tonight.
She said, I'm going home.
Yeah, going home, I'm tired. I'm leaving tonight, I'm going home. And she did.
I mean, how often, similar to Juanita, how many people do you encounter that seem to know that they're going to die soon?
Well, I do think, this idea of us trying to hide from people like they're going to die, a lot of families will try to hide that from the person who's actually coming onto hospice. I do think most people know that they are dying generally. So I think most people know, just because they're in their body, they can kind of tell. But every once in a while, people really do seem like they can choose, if it's tonight or if I'm going to wait till after a daughter's wedding or wait till everyone leaves, they want to be alone, wait till everyone gets there. It is one of the phenomena that I do feel like I see not the least, but not as much as the other ones, like visioning, rallying.
Yeah.
But when I see it, it's surprising, but it's also like, we just see this,
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to know when you're going to die, and the other thing is just like even like choosing exactly when you decide to go.
When.
And they're like waiting, and that was the whole component, that they're waiting for certain things to happen, a milestone to see certain people, and then they pass.
Yeah, and it's usually related to their personality too. Like a lot of families will say they were so sad because they all like waited around their dad's bed, for days. And then finally, one by one, people started kind of peeling away because they had to go to the bathroom or get coffee or get a change of clothes. And then their dad dies when no one's around. And I think what I've seen anyway is that like people who are more introverted, more prideful, more independent, don't want people to see them like that, seem to want to die alone, want to be alone when they die. And then people who were like the matriarch of the family, who really were the ones who like were outgoing and had the family parties, and they will wait. I saw a 90-some-year-old lady once actively die, which means the last phase of life, fully unconscious, not eating and drinking, changes in breathing, like they could die any moment, live like that for 3 weeks, which is literally unheard of, until everyone that she ever had met, not really, but she had a big family. It was like literally 40 people in the house by the time she died, until everyone got there, and then she died.
See, that's so weird, because she's basically like unconscious, and yet she like waits till like every single person.
And I was the nurse, so I was visiting every single day for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It was like, and then as the weeks went on, right, and one, it's unheard of. And if you don't see this every day, you don't know it's unheard of. I'm trying to tell her family, like, you don't understand. This is strange. That not strange. This is like magnificent that we're all witnessing this. And like each week, like the house would get more filled. People were just waiting there until she died. And then they were waiting for like 2 more people, I think. And then literally they were actually waiting for 2 more people. And then they arrived, and then she died.
Yeah, I mean, there's about, there's just so many unusual things that are happening. I mean, the visioning this, and it kind of brings me back to science in a sense of science is at its best when it's questioning everything, right? It's pushing the bounds of what's possible. And what's funny is religion, even rightfully so, has gotten flack for dogmatic attitudes. And the irony of that is when you go into academia and science, and then there's things that are happening that we're like, well, I don't really know what to make that, so I'm just going to put it in this category over here. And this is the only thing that counts as science. You're now starting to adopt a religious mindset of dogma, and it's funny if you trace the progression of science throughout time, there are certain things, even like neuroplasticity and brain plasticity in the brain, that was seen as like cuckoo in the 1960s, and now that's accepted neuroscience. And so I think when it comes to observing these things that are happening at the end of death and the consistency and the patterns of like what is noticing, it's something that like needs to be paid attention to, like, you know, what is happening. And then the shuttle shifts that happens of when you have a family member who's deeply concerned about this person that's dying is going crazy or something, and you're like, no, that's part of the process. It actually like informs how we behave now, and the way that we respond to these things, I think is interesting.
And I think I like to respond to those things like it is science, right? Like not like this is what happens because, and could be true, like this is happening because there's an afterlife, but no, like this is happening because this is what happens when someone's dying.
Yeah.
Period. Like that's what we've experienced. Like we don't know why it does, but it does. And I think it's important we keep sharing like that. That's why, I mean, hence my platform. You know, people need to know about what happens at the end of life. And I feel like they mostly don't until they experience it with their loved ones, which everyone will, by the way, eventually.
Yeah. Everybody dies.
Yeah, everyone dies. It's not about when, it's if. Or no, not about if, it's when.
The strangest one, I think for people, the rallying thing, right? So you have, and I think, so you have rallying, and then you have people that have these terminal illnesses, and then they go through periods where they're basically not really responsive, and then something happens. So you can explain what the rallying terminal lucidity is.
Yeah, that's the most. So 1 in every 3 patients will experience this, which is crazy. I think that's many people.
Very high, yeah.
So and the way it looks, Grey's Anatomy actually did an episode about it, like, and it was pretty accurate. But people are mostly unconscious, getting very close to death. So they haven't really been eating, mostly sleeping. Looks like it's getting close. They're calling family members in, you know, to say their goodbyes, and then suddenly, boom, the person has a really good day. Or 2 days where they are suddenly talking and walking and hungry, and their like feisty personality comes back. And it can be it's amazing and jarring, because people will be like, oh, they're not going to die. You know, they're getting better, look. And then it makes it the rally, because then they die shortly after. So if people have that experience and then they don't die, or they continue to feel good for weeks, that's not the rally. The rally is a couple good days and then they die shortly after. And I think it's important to know about this beforehand. You know, it's really hard to be the bearer of bad news, which I have been many times when I see this in my patients, you know, to make sure people understand, like, hey, this is a time to be cherished, but your loved one will likely die soon after. So I like to try to prepare over on this end. If you see something like this, please know that this is probably what's happening. And I mean, it's a gift. It's obviously sad and devastating because the person's dying, but it's also a gift because they get to be with their loved one who they've kind of lost already, you know, because they've been sick for so long.
Yeah, I think it's a really, and we'll get to the biology of dying. I think it's a very interesting. There's such a clear pattern of what's happening there that ties into the biology of dying. But then when you zoom out and you think about the nature of reality itself and what clue it would be giving into that, I mean, I find the one about specifically with dementia or Alzheimer's to be very, very fascinating.
Yeah.
About consciousness and the idea of this being all that there is, because Alzheimer's, I mean, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and it was the most debilitating process of just deterioration. And by the time she died, I mean, she was just sitting there, mouth open, not even responsive. And then yet I was reading all these articles online about patients that are in hospice or something else that have Alzheimer's, and then all of a sudden, I mean, it's kind of like The Notebook.
It is like The Notebook,
where
I know.
they come back.
Yes.
And I'm like, how is that possible? What possible explanation could there be outside of like consciousness is not like solely like located in the brain, or there's another component that we're not seeing here? I don't know what your thoughts are on the Alzheimer's thing specifically.
If you think about how that disease works, it's a progressional disease. So like people aren't always going to get worse, never better, right? It's always, and it's a horrific, slow disease where you lose your loved one kind of over and over and over again, because first, it's not just about forgetting, as you know. It's not just about forgetting. It's about they forget, because they not only forget you, their loved ones, but they forget how to talk. They forget how to eat. They forget how to walk, right? And that's progressively slow over time. And science says they won't regain that until sometimes they do, right? And it's not like, and everything's fixed and fine. No, that's not how it goes. Yeah. It's the rally. It's moments. And I think even people with Alzheimer's sometimes can have periods where that's why with the rally and the surge, with specifically dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, like anything, or MS, anything like that can mess with your brain cognitively, you can almost have like bursts of the rally or energy where you don't necessarily die right after, where they can kind of come back for an afternoon. Like, they had a really great afternoon. Like, I walked in and they knew who I was, and they said they were hungry, and they remembered that they loved this pie that they used to love. Things like that, right? Where it's like they're not supposed to be able to talk anymore because they've hit that progression where they don't talk. And they don't talk for weeks, months. And then all of a sudden they wake up one morning and go, "Good morning, Richard," or whatever their son's name. And they're like, what the hell? Yeah, and have a normal conversation. And we don't know why that happens, but it does. And it's even happened to me as a hospice nurse, where we're not having a full-on conversation, but it says in the notes that so-and-so can no longer speak, and they haven't spoken. And then I'll say, "Hi, so-and-so, how are you today?" And they'll look at me and go, "Good, how are you?"
Yeah.
Even that to me is fascinating, because they're not supposed to be able to do that.
Yeah, if you were to do the MRI scans and look at the brain, like a demented, someone that has a dementia or Alzheimer's, and see the physical changes in the brain, and we're trying to understand physical health and how this even happens, or what are the causes of Alzheimer's, but there's such a contrast in someone being so unresponsive and then suddenly lucid.
Yeah.
And it's just really weird. And so, we're not done with the deathbed phenomenon. So we covered. This is what's crazy about it. You have visioning, you have that, people who seem to know they're going to die or choose they're going to die. And then the other one, which is, there's like two. So you have the death stare, which goes back to the Steve Jobs story, or the death reach. And so this just gave me chills when I heard about this one. So you can take us into what that is and how it's different from visioning.
Yes. So the death stare. So okay. So the death stare is when someone, and this happens many times, I'm sure anyone who has witnessed their loved ones dying usually will see this. So people who are dying will be making eye contact a lot of times with their loved ones who are visiting, right? And then all of a sudden you'll see them kind of drift off, and their eyes will go to another place in the room, not looking at anybody, usually staring up at the ceiling or staring off at a wall, and they will be fixated on it. Sometimes they just sit there and stare. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they say hello to whoever it is that they are seeing. So that is the death stare, and you cannot get them out of it. So you can be snapping, hello, and they will not snap out of it until they do, until all of a sudden, and then they're back with you again. Sometimes they're able to say what's going on, and sometimes they can't. And then a lot of times what goes along with the death stare is they're staring, and then maybe you'll see them smile, and then maybe you'll see them like reach up and say something. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. The smile thing really gets me. Again,
I know.
It's like a pleasant thing. They're staring and then they smile.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I had a lady, some of the stories I have, like they don't sound profound, which I'll tell this one that doesn't sound profound, I don't think, but it was so profound to me. So I had this like elderly lady once, she had all of her family around, which was so amazing. She wasn't really talking much and she was really pleasant, right? Pleasant, but not really speaking. And all of a sudden I saw her do the death stare and she was staring and she was smiling. And then everyone kept going, she keeps doing this, she keeps doing this. And I was just educating about how it's normal and it's okay. And look, she's smiling, it's okay. She's obviously seeing someone or seeing something she's happy about. And then I grabbed her hand to go like, hi, introduce myself. And she looked at me and she just pulled me near her and put my forehead on her forehead and just like sat there and held my hand. And we just like rested our foreheads on each other and nothing was said. But to me, like, those are the days that I'm like, this is amazing. I don't know why, but it is. Like, I don't know what that was, but I love you, and this is great, and I love being a hospice nurse.
Yeah, I mean, many people think about death, and it's like the most terrifying thing, and yet there seems to be this heightened awareness, and that's happening, and they're experiencing all these things, and then, I mean, it seems like there's like a peace
Yes.
that is overcoming in the room.
Yes.
The fact that you could be a hospice nurse, I mean, like, this is amazing.
Yes.
Like,
And
you're
it's
a hospice nurse.
And I feel like she was trying to like share it with me.
Yeah.
Like share that piece, like whatever it was. She couldn't tell me what was going on, but she like grabbed my hand and brought me to her and we were like forehead to forehead. I'm basically a stranger, so is she, but it didn't feel like that in the moment. That's the kind of stuff that's like that's the stuff that makes me be like, I love what I do.
Yeah.
And this is what life is all about.
There's, again, you change names, but, page 108, there's another
Yes.
story, literally, basically brought me to tears. It struck me so much. A woman and her husband named Bob. So can you tell me what that story is?
Oh my gosh, yes, the daughter told me the story. So this woman, the daughter is retelling the story of her mom in bed. She's the mom's dying. And suddenly she looks up, does this death stare, right? And reaches and then reaches up and goes, "Oh, Bob, I've missed you." And the daughter, it gives me chills right now. The daughter was like, "Bob was my dad, her husband. He died 5 years earlier." And she was up there, she was smiling, going, "Bob, I missed you." And then she put her arms down and like she didn't see him anymore and started crying and then said, "I'll see you soon." And then died shortly after. And then, of course, the daughter's telling me the story, right? And she just lost her mom. But it's also like, I'm so grateful, she said. Like, I'm so grateful. Like, my mom literally saw my dead dad before she died, cried because she missed him so much, and then said she was coming to see him soon. It's like, I mean, and then what's crazy is I hear stories like this all the time, where it's like almost second place. Like it's easy to forget them because you hear them so much. But I mean, it doesn't really get old either.
So, you are, you're experiencing all of this and you're witnessing it. And so now there's something that happened in your journey where you go from observing to experiencing. And even saying that, people are like, what does he mean by that? It's just so hard to imagine. But, you tell a story in the book, patient named Randy. So can you give us as like much detail, like in your surrounding the circumstances of that story and what exactly happened?
Yes. So just for context, this story happened years and years ago. So like right when I became, I wasn't a new hospice nurse, but new-ish. So it was many years ago. And I did not tell this story for years because like you said, it was something that I experienced and I was basically afraid to tell it because I was afraid of judgment. But it did change how I viewed death so much. And it was one of the reasons why I don't really fear death. And people used to always ask me why I don't, and then I would never share the story. And eventually I was like, okay, I got to tell people why, because this is one of the reasons why. So I had a patient who we call Randy, and he was young. He was younger, probably in his 50s. And he came on to hospice with no family, no friends, really. And he had a lot of outside issues, right? He was coming onto hospice and dying, but also he had a lot of mental health issues, a long history of mental health. So he didn't have many friends, family's not around. And when he came onto service, he needed a lot of help, like a lot of mental help, his house wasn't safe to be in. He was a hoarder. He was like really anxious, really guarded. And for whatever reason, because he was dying, I think he said later, he sort of like gave over to the hospice team and like allowed us to help him, whereas years before he never would allow anyone to help him. So within one weekend, like the hospice team like cleared out his house. We called like 2 distant cousins to come in, and like they helped us basically clean everything out so he could have a nice apartment to eventually die in. And now, granted, he allowed us to do this. And if anyone knows like hoarding, it's usually not how it goes. So, like people do that for a reason, right? So, but for whatever reason, he like let go and let us help him. Okay. So by the next time I saw him, he was like a different man. He was like happy. He was more free, more open. And he ended up living like 9 months, which doesn't sound like a lot, but from what he was dying from and for what he was like when we first saw him, that's like crazy. It was crazy. And a good 9 months. And he made friends with like all of our team. I would go over there a lot. He didn't have tons of symptoms. So like when I would visit, like we would just sort of hang out and just talk about his life. And we would talk about existential things. Like he wasn't afraid to talk about his own death. So he would talk to me about like how he was afraid to die and what did that mean and how he lived and he didn't live this like free life and he had a lot of regrets. All of this to be said, we all grew super close to this guy, okay? I don't have favorite patients, but if I did, he probably would be my favorite patient. I still think of him all the time. Anyway, when he was getting close to his death, we did have a continuous care nurse in his house when he started actively dying, which means he was unconscious. He was dying very soon, and we had a nurse in there 24 hours a day caring for him to make sure his symptoms were managed. And on the last day, when I visited him, I could tell he'd probably die that day. I could tell by how he was breathing, by how he looked. I'm like, I think he's going to die today. And we had another nurse there caring for him 24/7. So I said, hey, listen, when he dies, make sure you text me so I know. And she said, no problem, of course. And before I left, I basically like said my goodbyes to him in my head. And I was walking out of his apartment and I didn't feel really sad. I felt like so grateful that I had met him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just like wish him the best. Whatever happens, like I wish him the best journey, and was like thanking him all the way to my car. And of course, as a hospice nurse, you like get in your car and you like go to your next patient. So it's like, even though you're losing someone that you like love, you're still working, right? So I'm in my car, like getting ready to go see my next patient. And I thought, no, I'm gonna wait. Like I need to give more respect to Randy is what I'm thinking in my head. And so I just like stop and I'm like looking at his apartment and I'm like talking to him again in my head, being like, oh, thank you, Randy. I just like love you so much. And like, I just wish you the best journey or whatever. And all of a sudden I heard Randy's voice in my head and he was like saying my name and he was going, oh my gosh, Julie. That's what it sounded like. Oh my gosh, Julie. Oh my gosh. And the reason why I look like I'm smiling and happy is because that's how it felt. Like not only did I hear his voice, but I felt like he gave me all of the senses. It was like I could hear him in my head. I could feel how he was feeling. And I could almost see him like he was like soaring, like he was happy. He was like, and he was going, oh my gosh, Julie. Oh my gosh. If I only would have known. If I only would have known. It makes me want to cry every time I talk about it because it was so beautiful. If I only would have known how good this was, I would never have been afraid. And he didn't say all of those words, but it was like a feeling. Really, the only words I heard in my head were, oh my gosh, Julie, if I only would have known. But the feeling was like he was so free. He was so happy. He was so joyful. If I could like picture it, it'd be like he was jumping up and down and like cheering, like he was so happy and so free. And I knew that all his life, all he wanted was to be free. He always talked about that, how he never felt free all through his life. And in death, I could tell he finally felt that. And I just felt, although I'm crying right now, it's like this is how I was in my car, except more. It was like an overwhelming feeling of peace and joy and happiness that I could not help but like cry in my car because it felt so good. It felt so good. And he just kept going, oh my gosh, Julie, oh my gosh, if I only would have known, if I only would have known. And it was like that for I don't know how long, because it felt like time stood still, right? Probably only a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, the max. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom. I was like back in my car and kind of like shell-shocked and like wiping my tears away, like, what the hell was that, you know? And then my phone beeped. And I looked at my phone, and the nurse inside said, so-and-so just died. And I was like, oh my God, I know. I think he just showed me. Like, I think he just showed me the transition of like him dying, or like the moments before he, whatever, went away to some other place. And I didn't say that to the nurse. I just said, thank you. And I dried my tears and like went on about my day. Right? And I told my best friend, Jenny, that's the only person I told, for years and years and years, because I've never experienced something like that. I didn't know what it was. I felt grateful that he showed me that he was free, because that's what I really, really wanted for him. And it made me feel so not scared of death, right? I mean, I've always kind of felt like death would be like that, but it felt reassuring to be felt like I was told, like, yeah, you're right. This is what it's going to be like. And eventually I just said, you know what? Screw it. I'll tell people about my experience. And then when I did, people started telling me, oh, that's people have those things. They're called shared death experiences, where people show you what it's like to die. And there's books about them. There's articles about it. Many people have experienced stuff like that. So it kind of opened up a whole new world for me once I shared my experience.
Yeah, when I think about the people listening to this podcast right now and how they might respond to what you're saying, I think some people are probably just overjoyed, like emotional, like, wow, that is like one of the most incredible things I ever heard. And then there's other people probably, who don't know what to do with it. They might be skeptical, what's going on in Julie's head, that is happening. And it's precisely why you probably feared telling the story for many years. And what I think is interesting, I think we're at a point in time when I don't think what you were experiencing was just a subjective experience. I actually think it was an objective clue into reality. For 7 years before I even had this conversation, I've been studying near-death experiences, which, if people are not familiar with it, that there's an entire field it's the closest field that sits on the edge of spirituality and science that had been studying stuff for 50 years. Basically, people who have experiences, maybe they're on an operating table, they die, they flatline, they have no brain activity, no heartbeat, and then yet they talk about going to another place. And near-death studies could be related to hospice care in the sense that someone might have a near-death experience when they're in a medical setting, but it's a completely different field. And so when I read your story about Randy and what you went through, the way that people talk about what comes after, or what they're experiencing when they are dead and then somehow they like miraculously come back to life, is so verbatim to what you were talking about. It's like people die in these near-death experiences and they don't want to come back.
Yeah. It's
literally like Randy being like, oh my gosh. There's a beautiful nature of it. And that's one of the, there's a whole string of scientists that are involved with this field. And that's one of the key things that they talk about, is almost overwhelming these people do not want to come back from wherever they were. And I just think that when we think about how to respond to stories like that, I think we're just at this unique point in time where like there are all these converging things. And I don't think your story should be something that is just written off. I think it's just like a beautiful clue into possibly like reality, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but from my perspective, I just find it to be incredible.
I think what Randy gave me was a gift. I think it was it's like he had a near-death experience but didn't come back and just showed me. I mean, generally speaking, I personally never want to be someone who is here to convince anyone to believe or not believe. It's like you either have experiences on your own and that's how you form what you believe. And I just happen to have experiences like this. And it informs my beliefs. So, and now I'm sharing them, right? Yeah. And it either helps, and hopefully it helps people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even like, if we go back to the definition I was talking about with the belief system versus spirituality or something being a seat of perception, I think what's interesting about is just sitting and observing and listening to this conversation is you're observing just patterns. You're observing things that are happening in certain settings, and it's observational. You're seeing people's personal experiences, but those personal experiences actually end up turning into like data. Like when it's stacked together and it's one after another, and there's all these consistent patterns, and those are the things that I think that are so interesting. I mean, it's what topic could possibly be more relevant to this, given that everybody on Earth fears dying, and they find it to be this horrible experience, the thing that we can't even talk about because we fear what comes after. And then we just feel like that if we live, this life is all that there is. Of course, you might feel terrified about what comes after. And I think your book really gives people a completely different perspective, not just into these experiences, but that this isn't something to be feared,
I do know. And also, I mean, even on this, on like the just from a biology standpoint, which I know you're not talking about that in this moment, but I think...
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, to me, the biology of death helps me not fear it as well. Nothing to do with spirituality at all, just the fact that the way our body dies, which we can get into, or which we will get into, I hope would help decrease fear. Because I mean, that's one of the main things that help me not fear death, seeing how our body knows how to do it. That to me is spiritual right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch a documentary, I mean, there's been documentaries on birth, and then people watch them, and this is insane. Yeah. And then I read your book, and there's a whole section on the biology of dying, and I'm like, this is like equally, if not more insane, what is actually happening. And so what happens, because it seems like the body knows it's going to die.
The body knows it's going to die. So just to give a little background, I was an ICU nurse for many years before I was a hospice nurse. And in the ICU, we're trying to like make the body not die, right? And many times that's amazing. And we help save lives and people keep living, and that's great. But many times we do things to the detriment of the person and they still die, right? And so that's what I was used to seeing, kind of like the back and forth of that. So when I became a hospice nurse and started witnessing what it was like for a body to die a natural death. So they're dying from some disease, but we're like naturally letting the progression of the disease and the body to shut down. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, which was the body knew it was dying, which I can get into. The body shuts down certain things and certain mechanisms kick in to help you die. And it was fascinating to me how people didn't necessarily even need medication. So I think people automatically assume you're dying, you use morphine, and the morphine kills you eventually. It's like so opposite of that. And the body, so the body physically knows it's dying, right? So once it knows that, it'll shut down your hunger and thirst mechanism in your brain, shuts it down. So you're no longer hungry and thirsty. It increases sleep, so it makes you tired. Now, that might not be fun for some people because they don't like being tired, but it is like this slow progression where the person usually becomes a little more inward, a little less social purposely because they know they're dying. They're tired a lot, so they sleep a lot. You hear people say, like, I wish I could just go to sleep and die. Like, I wouldn't have to deal with it. That's kind of what happens. People sleep a lot. They are not hungry and thirsty because the body knows that the drier you are, the better you usually feel. So they're not like starving to death. A lot of people think like my loved one starved to death, or they must be thirsty. This must be hard for them. People are not dying because they're not eating and drinking. They are not eating and drinking because they're dying. And eventually, if you just let the body do its thing, a lot of times the body will go into ketosis on its own, which dulls pain, releases endorphins, makes you feel good. So the more we can allow the body to naturally do its thing, usually the more peaceful someone dies and the better they feel. Now, if anyone's listening to this being like, that is not how that, it didn't happen for my loved one, it's not as simple as I'm making it, because there are certain diseases that are harder to die from. Certain cancers can be difficult. There could be pain involved, shortness in breath, things like that. But generally speaking, the dying part, the actual body dying, is not painful. Like, our bodies are built to do it. We are built to live and we are built to die. And watching that over and over again has been the number one thing to cause me to not fear death. The number one, even beyond all of the visioning and things like that, the biology of watching someone die is what makes me not fear death.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because it's such coordinated activity.
Oh,
yes. Like it's meant to happen or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the precision in which, and again, these are like biological mechanisms that you're observing that just happen in the body that would then guide us through this experience. It stuck out immediately to me when I learned about this, because that's just not what you would expect.
No, people don't know about it. I mean, even myself as an ICU nurse, I did not know this stuff. I did not know that the body did this. I didn't know that it will turn off your hunger and thirst mechanism. I didn't know these things. I think it takes you working in this field to really know a lot about it, because people don't want to learn about it for the most part. Yeah. Hence why I'm here to try to tell people, listen, this is cool. Isn't that weird that for me to say that? But I do. I think it's fascinating. And education decreases fear, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you add all of it together, what we're talking about, what people say when they're dying, what they see, what their bodies do, it doesn't just reframe death. It kind of reorients life, like in the sense of right now,
Preach it. Yes, I loved it. It doesn't, yes, that's exactly it. Like, to me, hospice is about life. It's not about death. Although many people think hospice, they think death. It is about living out the rest of your life. And a hospice is a place or people who can help you do that by managing pain. If you have it, by the way, not everyone dying has pain. And helps you understand. Like, I think the more you understand death, the better you live and the more peaceful you will die.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why your work hit me so hard, because I think what your field and your work is doing, it's like, it speaks to a lot of the things that we struggle with and we're trying to find our way back to. I mean, we were talking about the biology, you're dying, you could consider your life is not random. Also, is there a design to the world, or even some of these more existential spiritual things, like, the idea that we're meant to connect something to something beyond ourselves. I see we've had a number of guests on this podcast, and there's such connective tissue between things that people are saying, because we talk about the mind, the body, and spirit so much. And we had Dr. Arthur Brooks on the podcast, and so he studies human happiness. He's a professor at Harvard. And he said one of the pillars of happiness also is the experience of transcendence. And so when we lose our connection to something bigger, life will feel incomplete. At worst, it's going to feel empty, maybe depressing, but at best, maybe it becomes incomplete. And so you seeing all these things, how has this changed like what you prioritize in life?
Yes, I love that. And I need to look this guy up.
Yeah.
I'm into it. So I think generally speaking, I always talk about how I really do contemplate my own mortality on a daily basis, which sounds morbid. And even my own mom is like, what? But it's really freeing. It's really shaped how I view my day-to-day life, which I think is really important. I think, generally speaking, I try to live in the day that I'm in, which helps me appreciate all of the little things that are really big things to me, like being present, smelling my coffee, tasting it and enjoying how it tastes, appreciating the sun, appreciating the rain, because I live in Los Angeles and I don't see the rain. So it's like these little things that can really you can miss them so easy. But I think because I see how fragile life really is in this, or maybe how it's so obvious to me that now that like I'm going to die no matter what I do. And if that is the case, how can I be in today and appreciate all the things that make my life so wonderful? Like the fact that I get to see, the fact that I can walk, the fact that I can hear birds, the fact that I can taste coffee, the fact that food tastes good to me. That's not always the case for everybody. And I just think it's important we all find these little bits of joy in the day that we're in now. And I also think, this is a little bit of a side note, but I also think we lack connection in our world in general. Connection to a higher power, yes, but also just connection to each other. So I think a lot of times we live in this individualistic society that keeps us like, you got to do it yourself. You got to be alone and not share anything. Like I feel like we're kind of taught to do things independently. And it really, I think it's not meant to be that way. I think we're meant to be connected. And I see that in my hospice patients. One of the greatest things I get to witness as a hospice nurse is the connection between families or friends or caregivers and the patient, and the love that's shown towards the person dying, despite how uncomfortable it is to be there. It's so uncomfortable. Like, I think we didn't really talk about that. Yes, it's going to be super sad, super uncomfortable, super hard, and people still choose to be there anyway. And to me, that is one of the greatest gifts that I get to witness. It's like love in action. You know, we were talking about God and existential things earlier before we were recording, and it's like, if I believe, and I do, that God is love and what God wants for us is love, then it's like that's what I get to witness all the time, and it's the most beautiful thing. And I think we need more of that. Yeah,
it's such a good point, because when you consider the more existential things that we're talking about, it isn't this like get out of jail free card to our emotions and our grief and all of that stuff. Like, we still have to face the realities of losing someone. Now, you might say that when that person dies or whatever, or you die and then you experience this crazy transcendence, whatever these people are explaining is very beautiful, but there is a struggle, there's a grief, there's a process and pain that holds. And so when you lose someone, you know, they're no longer here. You know, they might be in a better place, but, you know, they're no longer here, and you have to deal with that. And so I think that, you know, talking about these things, I think a lot of people are just completely unprepared to deal, because we never talk about it. And then it happens, and you're like, you have no coping skills. You have no way, and you had a whole part of your book about grief, and you know, there's just no coping skills for this entire thing, and everybody dies.
Yes, and most people don't know what it looks like too. That's a whole nother thing about. I think it's really important, and I get a lot of heat from this because people say it's too graphic, but I show real life actively dying, what it really looks like when someone's actively dying. Because on movies, they show someone giving a beautiful monologue and then being like, good night, and like smile on their face, and then they die. It's like, that's not how this works. That's not how this works. Usually they're unconscious. There's changes in breathing. There's terminal secretions. There's things that don't look, your loved one doesn't look like they used to look. And sometimes it takes days, and you're sitting there like, what the heck is going on here? No one explained this to me. No one told me it was going to look like this. And if you don't know that, and it's your loved one, it can be really traumatic. So I think it's so important to bring to light what death really looks like, and to know that your loved one really isn't suffering. This is truly a biological thing. They are okay. This is what it looks like. And all you have to do is be there. Now, it still can be uncomfortable and hard, but to be there. to make like a really, instead of having it feel really scary, having it feel a little more sacred. And I think it can do that when you know what to expect and what's happening and why it's happening.
That's so good. What when you think about this and you think about what you've seen and what you experience, what it's changed how you live your daily life. But what about in terms of what you think matters most in life?
Oh my gosh, I think what matters most in life is connection with other people. And I think that can happen by saying your truth in the moment, which I know sounds very like, ooh, what does that mean? But I just think, I think we connect to people by being honest and by being truthful, by being who we are and showing up real. And sometimes that means saying you're stressed out or saying you feel sad or saying you feel happy. Like, I just think so much so we live in this world of like, how are you? Good. How are you? And not really like getting down to like what's really going on. And I think we need to do more of that. There's something about truth telling in your day-to-day life that helps you connect to people. And when you feel connected to people, you don't feel alone. At least for me, I don't feel alone. And it changes everything in my life. It changes everything in my life by being able to like show up and connect to others. So there's many things I think that are important, but I think that is the one thing that really keeps me feeling the most content.
I think what's interesting when you think about what makes a successful or meaningful life through the lens of your work is interesting because there's certain things that our culture, society puts on a pedestal as this is what life is about. It's about being successful in your career. It's about being beautiful. It's about getting wealth. It's about becoming famous. It's about, I don't know. So like indulging yourself with all the pleasures in the world. We have all these ideas, and a lot of those ideas are plastered on social media, and then you are just so close to death. And so what do people who are dying tend to regret?
Yes, so that's perfect because this is why I say what I say. So the one thing that I don't ever hear anyone talk about when it comes to deathbed regrets is the one thing that I hear that is what I think most people do regret, which is they regret not appreciating their health. So a lot of people talk about they regret not like saying things they're supposed to say or doing things they wanted to do, but that's not what I hear the most. What I hear the most is people regretting not appreciating their health when they had it. And it's usually not articulated like that. It's usually like in passing. I'll hear them say, oh, I wish I appreciated it when I could like taste this cheeseburger. Like food just tastes different now. Or like, I wish I appreciated when I had an appetite. Like I don't have an appetite. I don't want to eat. And of course on hospice we'll say, then don't eat. It's okay. But it feels good to feel hungry, to be able to eat food when you feel hungry. It feels good to have an appetite. It feels good to taste food and have legs that don't feel weak so you can walk around the block. So those are the things that I hear most of my patients say, which is why I say I contemplate my mortality, and the things I think about are not like, so quit my job and go on vacation because I'm going to be dying. The things I think about are like, I'm so happy I can like taste this French fry with ranch. It's so good. And I'm so grateful that it still tastes good to me. I love that like my coffee in the morning is so good. Those are the little things that my patients have taught me, that those are the things that they regret not appreciating while they could experience them. I try to do that.
Yeah.
I really do try to do that on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a mindfulness in being present and attuned to those things that has just been lost in daily life. I mean, you had mentioned earlier, I mean, just even the experience of I can breathe, I can do all these things, and that brings into light like a really important practice of like gratitude. And so like most people are inundated with messages that make them crave for more and crave for things that they don't have. And a lot of people are sitting with this and they actually do have their physical health and they actually can do some of these things, I think it's a call back to gratitude and appreciation of those things. But then the other thing I'm hearing is you're talking about basically just being present.
Yeah. I think people really can live with the notion that death is not really there, right? Like, yeah, we all can say we're going to die. Yeah, we know. But I think it's easy to like deny that and live in a world where like that's not really going to happen, at least not now or not yet, or it's down the road. And I get that. That's self-preservation. Like, I get why that's happening. But I think because I just witness it so often and I just see how it really is a thing, I think it can be used as a tool. I think a lot of people think it's, oh, that's too scary. And that hasn't been my experience. One, death hasn't really felt scary to me. Two, I've used it as a tool to be able to live in that world of gratitude and presence where I truly can appreciate the little things. It doesn't get away from me. I think it can get away from you when you don't really fully grasp that you will die someday. And I'm laughing because I realize that for most people hearing that is like, oh God, stop it. But it's like been the greatest gift to me. It's been the greatest gift that I really understand that.
Well, one of the things that struck me most about what you're saying is being able to observe the love that's happening in a room between a family and someone who's dying. And I think that teaches us a lot about like what our purpose here is on earth.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
I think our purpose here will be, I think everyone's purpose will be possibly different, but generally speaking, again, and from my experience, our purpose here is to connect. I believe, and this is just my belief, but I believe we are technically all one. Like we already all are connected, whether we know it or not. Yeah, whether we know it or not. So to all of a sudden be able to feel that connection and know that connection, which I think can come with presence and with truth telling and with showing up and being your real self, which is usually very, really vulnerable and scary. But when you do it, I think you can feel that connection. And to me, that is what life is all about. Because that connection ultimately leads to like the higher connection, which I also think we are all connected to, So to me, it's about remembering to remember that is what we are here for, to connect. And it takes vulnerability to be able to do that. And death and someone dying can bring that. And I think because my grief is not there, it's not my loved one. Right, when you're so involved, when your grief is so strong, it's really hard to, see the forest from the trees. But when I'm like the observer, so I just see it all and feel it all, and it's really, really beautiful. So I think I want more people to understand that that's what's happening when I'm witnessing death. I get to see love in action and see that connection's really happening. And I think that's what life's all about.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful telling of it.
Long-winded.
No. I think it's a very, very accurate, a beautiful telling of it. I think the word purpose itself is interesting because people conflate their purpose and their calling. And so it kind of attaches to kind of what you were saying is that in one sense, we all have the same purpose. And we're recognizing the connectedness in all of us, and then you're acknowledging kind of like a vertical connection or higher power into each other, and how that manifests in love. Because a lot of people, when I think about your profession, it's like the utmost expression of service to another person, and the way that you're caring for these people. And I think that universal nature of understanding our purpose as something that's like serving other people. And you do that through love and action, right? We associate love as a feeling, right? It is a feeling. You could feel that in a room probably when you're with these people, but it's also in the way that you serve people. And then there's like the calling aspect of it, which is different. You're a hospice nurse. I'm sitting here interviewing you right now. I'm doing something different. And so there's like multiple expressions of that. But I think if we could get back to whatever it is we're doing and what matters most in life, it does come back to that, like, love in action, to like express yourself through service of other people. And hearing things like this and having these sorts of conversations are sort of wake-up calls that like bring you back to that reality, because we're so consumed with all these other areas of life and all these things that we think that matter that might not matter when you're when you're lying on your deathbed. There is this journalist at the New York Times. His name is David Brooks. And so he's written a number of different books. He's like a very famous journalist, but he had this article 10 years ago, and he was talking about the difference between eulogy virtues versus resume virtues, right? And so,
oh my gosh, right.
So when someone's lying in a casket and someone is giving a eulogy, the felt experience of that person will be seen through the words and things that people are using to describe them. And so for someone who built their whole life on their career, their resume virtues, like that person people might talk about them in terms of their accomplishments, but they won't necessarily talk about them in the terms that you're expressing and talking about in this conversation. And I think that ultimately is what matters in life, is like how do the people around us experience us, and are we leaning into that? Are we leaning into presence? So
I know.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately I keep saying this over and over again, but it takes vulnerability, and I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. That sounds. I don't want that to sound judgmental, but it does sound a little judgmental. But I don't want it to. I just think it's important to. I think it starts there. If someone's thinking like, "Well, how do I do all that? How do I do that?" It's like there's a vulnerability to it that goes against our culture a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, there's to be. You said the thing about expressing your own truth, which I think is interesting, because that term, people associate that with, I don't know, so many different things. But at the end of the day, what you're really saying is the honesty to show up and like be who you actually are, and be that, and have a community maybe of people who are committed to doing the same thing.
Yes.
Will enhance the richness of life. But we just don't have the vocabulary to do that.
Right. Yeah. Like if I think about my patients, people who say, are your patients afraid of death? Right. And it's like, yeah, mostly. But what I tell them, when someone's willing to say, I feel afraid, it's like, that to me is like the ultimate. Like I whenever a patient says that to me, I'm like, congratulations. Well, number one, you're normal. Number two, the fact that you're even willing to say that tells me everything I need to know, which is like, you're going to be fine. Because that's what people need to do. It's just, when it comes to actual death and dying and being honest, the more honest you can be about it, which is, I'm afraid, I'm angry, I don't want to die, or then the loved one coming back. I don't want you to die. I'm so angry. This is so hard. This is so unfair. That is the only thing that needs to be said. There doesn't need anyone to, no one needs to go, don't be afraid, or it's okay. At least, hopefully it won't, it's just like, no, we just stop there, period. And I know this because I've witnessed it with my own eyes, and I've experienced it, that when you just allow the truth to sit there, when the truth is, I'm pissed about this, magical things can happen. That pissedness kind of goes away. You feel the love between you two. You have this meaningful experience that you'll never forget, and you feel comforted by that person. And it kind of changes things, even for a moment. And that's the stuff that I think people are missing out on, because they're they're afraid to show up truthfully, because it's scary.
Yeah, I mean, the word love has gotten so flattened and cliched to the fact that you don't even know what people mean when they say that, or like life is about love. But when I hear you speak, it really makes me think that it is creating spaces and a presence for people to be able to express those feelings. Like that must be one of those components of it. And so if we have spaces where people can speak honestly there's a sense of connection and that comes out of that, of feeling seen and heard, and not even necessarily needing to fix whatever that person is telling you in the moment, because I think that's the reaction. And this happens all the time with grief, right? It's like we want to like awkwardly say something to the person just to make it better in the moment, because we don't know what to say. But maybe maybe the simplest thing is to just sit there and look at them and hear them and hear what they're saying without offering any sort of solution, because there is no solution.
There is no solution
to that, you know?
Especially with grief. I would actually say do not offer solution. There is not a solution. The solution is to hear that person. And if anything, say the truth. And sometimes the truth is, I don't know what to say. My heart hurts so bad for you. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. I want to be here with you though. Or I want to be here for you.
Yeah. And that requires, again, that requires presence.
Yeah.
Because there's an entering in that you need to do. And I think that's uncomfortable for people. But I think it's going back to like, what is life all about? We need those spaces. Those spaces need to exist, and it might require you like an entering into that person's experience, and then you experience a moment of connection because you did that. So, yeah. There's a line, as we close, I think you wrote something at the end of your book, and I haven't been able to, at the end of that section in your book, I haven't really been able to stop thinking about it. And you described this feeling that you've carried since you were like a little girl.
Yeah, I mean, people always ask me like, what do I feel, what do I think happens after we die, And for me personally, I feel like and you and everyone, but I can speak for myself. Like, I feel like I'm going to go home. I'm going to, on my deathbed, close my eyes and wake up and be home. Like, I've always, since I've been a little girl, I always say I've felt homesick for a place that I have forgotten. And when I see like a baby, like I was saying earlier, when I see a baby, I feel like I can feel that place that I once knew. And when I see someone dying or close to death or taking their last breath, I can feel that place that I have forgotten. And I just feel like, I feel homesick for this place. And I think I think when we die, we're not going, we don't have to get into a place. I feel like we're going back to a place. We're going back to the place that we once knew. We're going back to the place that we came from. And I think it's going to feel like relief. Like, oh my God, I'm back. Thank God. Like, why'd you leave me there so long? That's what I think. I have a strong sense of that. It makes me cry a lot when I think about it, because I do. I feel like I miss this place, and I get glimpses of that place when I'm with people who are dying, when I'm with babies, when I feel connected to people and I have like honest conversations, and I feel like there's this spark of this thing, whatever this thing is, but that thing feels like home to me. And I love being here and I love experiencing life, and I'm so grateful for it. And I think I don't have to fear leaving this place, because I think I'm going to a place that's going to feel more like home than here ever could. And yeah, I
love that. I mean, I love that word glimpse, because I think anybody who listening to this today, whatever they've experienced or whatever they believe, I think so many people can resonate with that glimpse. Like, there are moments in life where something transcends. It's a moment of beauty. It's a moment of connection with someone. And it does feel like otherworldly, and it's not constant. Like, these things are not constant, and you just experience like glimmers of it. And even our perception of time is really interesting. We are human beings with a human lens, and we have a brain, and we're here. And we perceive time in a linear fashion. But I don't know what that looks like, when we die. And I don't know what that would mean for how we reflect back on our human experience on Earth. But I certainly find your take on how homesickness to be something that resonated deeply with me. So, yeah. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been so great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful conversation.